Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Matthew 7, verse 1. The world often tempts us to judge others by what we see, but what lies beneath the surface. This is the story of Clara, a woman whose seemingly perfect life was shattered by a lesson in grace. Clara was a star at her advertising firm. Her reputation for being the first to arrive and the last to leave was a badge of honor she wore proudly. Her presentations were flawless, her deadlines always met, and her email responses near instantaneous. People respected her competence, but feared her sharp tongue. Clara didn't just hold herself to high standards. She demanded the same from everyone else. When a coworker stumbled, Clara was quick to judge. She would roll her eyes during meetings if someone fumbled a presentation or mutter under her breath about others' lack of professionalism. If I can handle my workload, why can't they? She often thought. Clara believed she was setting an example, but in reality, she had built walls around herself, walls that left no room for empathy. The weekend had been unusually chaotic for Clara. Her elderly mother had called her in tears on Saturday morning, needing help with a leaky roof. That afternoon, her younger sister had shown up unannounced with her twin toddlers, turning Clara's normally pristine apartment into a war zone of toys and sticky fingerprints. By Sunday evening, Clara was emotionally and physically drained. Amid the chaos, she had completely forgotten about an important task, finalizing the presentation for one of her company's biggest clients. As she drifted off to sleep that night, the feeling nagged at her, but exhaustion won. Monday morning arrived with a torrential downpour. Clara woke up late, the sound of rain hammering against her windows. She reached for her phone, only to see a string of urgent emails from her manager. Clara, is the client deck ready? The meeting's at 9. Her stomach dropped. She had forgotten. Completely. Panic set in as she scrambled to open her laptop, her hands shaking. The clock ticked mercilessly as she tried to assemble the slides, but her thoughts were scattered. Her usual efficiency had been replaced by sheer desperation. As the minutes passed, the knot in her stomach tightened. Clara was never late. Clara never messed up, but today, the cracks in her perfect facade were showing. She bolted out the door without breakfast, umbrella in hand. The rain showed no mercy, soaking her shoes and ruining her carefully styled hair. By the time she arrived at the office, she was drenched, her heart pounding with dread. Clara's manager was waiting for her by the conference room, his expression unreadable. The client was already inside, reviewing the incomplete deck that Clara had hastily sent minutes before leaving her apartment. "This isn't like you, Clara," he said, his voice low but firm. "What happened?" Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. She wanted to explain, to justify her oversight. But what could she say? That she'd been too busy hosting her family? That the rain had slowed her down? Every excuse fell hollow. As the door closed behind her manager, Clara sank into her chair, her face burning with shame. For the first time in her career, she had failed, and everyone knew it. Lunchtime came, but Clara couldn't bring herself to join her co-workers in the break room. She stayed at her desk, poking at a wilted salad she had bought that morning. The office buzzed around her, but she felt isolated, as though a spotlight had been cast on her failure. For years, Clara had judged others harshly for their mistakes, assuming they stemmed from laziness or incompetence. Now, sitting alone with the weight of her own failure, she began to see things differently. She felt the sting of judgment, not from others, but from herself. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She looked up to see Emily, one of her co-workers, standing at her desk with a steaming cup of coffee. Emily was everything Clara wasn't. She was bubbly, disorganized, and frequently late. Clara had often dismissed her as someone who didn't take work seriously. But now, Emily's smile was kind, not condescending. "I thought you might need this," Emily said, placing the coffee on Clara's desk. "Rough mornings happen to the best of us." Clara blinked, her throat tightening. "Thanks," she whispered, barely able to meet Emily's gaze. "If you need help catching up, just let me know," Emily added before walking away. Clara stared at the coffee cup, her thoughts racing. Emily's gesture was simple, yet it carried a weight Clara couldn't ignore. She had been so quick to label Emily as unreliable, Yet here she was, offering support without a hint of judgment. That evening, as Clara walked home in the rain, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." Clara had always brushed off the verse as a reminder for others, not for her. She thought her judgments were justified, that they kept the team accountable. But now, she realized how blind she had been to the struggles others might be facing. Her grandmother's voice softened in her memory. "Clara, grace isn't about excusing mistakes. It's about recognizing that we all fall short. We all need it." The next morning, Clara arrived at the office with a renewed perspective. During the daily team meeting, she noticed one of her colleagues struggling to explain their ideas. Normally, Clara would have jumped in, impatient and critical. But this time, she waited. "Take your time," she said gently. "We're here to help." Her colleagues exchanged surprised glances. This was not the Clara they were used to. Over the weeks that followed, Clara made a conscious effort to change. She began asking her coworkers how they were doing, offering help instead of criticism. Slowly but surely, the office atmosphere shifted. The walls Clara had built around herself began to crumble, replaced by bridges of trust and collaboration. One afternoon, she stayed late to help Emily with the project. As they worked side by side, Clara finally opened up. "Thank you for the coffee that day," she said. "I was so overwhelmed, and you didn't have to be kind to me, but you were." Emily smiled. "We all have rough days," she said. "The important thing is how we show up for each other." Clara's transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was real. She learned to lead with empathy rather than judgment, to see her co-workers not as their mistakes, but as their potential. One evening, as she closed her laptop and prepared to leave the office, Clara paused by her desk. On a sticky note, she wrote the verse that had reshaped her heart. "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." She placed it in her planner as a daily reminder. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. How often do we assume we know someone's story based on a single action? Like Clara, we may judge others for falling short, not realizing how close we are to stumbling ourselves. Grace is not just a gift we give to others. It's a gift that transforms us. Today, think about someone you've judged too quickly. What burden might they be carrying? What grace can you offer them? Remember, the measure we use to judge others will be used to judge us. Choose compassion. Choose grace.